He laughed at her voice. He mocked her heritage. He thought she was just another confused tourist clogging up his priority lane. But Brad, the senior gate agent for Meridian Airways, didn't know that the woman standing quietly at the counter held the power to bankrupt his entire quarterly projection by sunrise. In the high-stakes world of luxury aviation, one arrogant mistake costs more than a job. It costs an empire. This is the story of how one man's prejudice against a distinct accent triggered the immediate exit of a $950 million travel group, and the brutal, real-life karma that followed. You might want to sit down for this one. The automatic doors of Terminal 4 at JFK hummed open, letting in a gust of humid July air that clashed instantly with the sterile, air-conditioned chill of the departures hall. It was 5:30 a.m., that jagged hour of the morning, where the lights seem too bright and the coffee hasn't quite kicked in. Doctor. Vivienne Toussaint adjusted the strap of her leather weekender bag. It was old leather, battered and soft, the color of cognac. To the untrained eye, it looked like something picked up at a flea market. To a connoisseur, it was recognizable as a bespoke piece from a century-old tannery in Florence, worth more than most mid-sized sedans. But Vivienne didn't dress for connoisseurs. She dressed for comfort, and today, for stealth. She wore a charcoal linen tunic, loose-fitting trousers, and simple sandals. No jewelry, save for a small, dull silver band on her thumb. Her hair was wrapped in a vibrant, indigo headscarf, a nod to her Senegalese grandmother. She looked like an artist, or perhaps a weary academic returning from a sabbatical. She certainly did not look like the CEO of Toussaint & Graves, the private equity firm that had just acquired a controlling stake in the largest luxury hotel chain in the Caribbean. Nor did she look like the lead negotiator for the Diaspora Ventures Consortium, a collective of high-net-worth travelers planning a massive transatlantic heritage tour. Vivienne was tired. The merger had kept her in boardrooms for 3 weeks straight. All she wanted was to check into the Meridian Airways Summit Lounge, drink a cup of chamomile tea, and review the contracts for the consortium's upcoming $950 million travel agreement. This flight to Zurich was the final handshake meeting. If Meridian Airways impressed her today, they would get the contract-exclusive rights to fly 15,000 premium passengers over the next 5 years. She navigated the crowded floor, bypassing the chaotic snake of the economy check-in line. She headed straight for the gold-carpeted lane, marked Summit Class/Invitation Only. The lane was empty, save for a man behind the high marble podium. Brad Holloway was the type of man who wore his uniform like armor. His Meridian Airways blazer was tailored a little too tightly around the biceps. His hair was gelled into an immovable helmet, and his name tag, Bradley Holloway, senior station lead, gleamed under the halogen lights. He was typing furiously on his terminal, a scowl etched deep into his forehead. Vivienne approached the podium. She waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Brad didn't look up. He didn't acknowledge her presence, even though she was the only person within 20 feet of him. "Good morning," Vivienne said softly. Her voice was low, carrying the rhythmic, melodic cadence of her upbringing, a blend of French inflection and West African lilt. It was a voice that had commanded silence in United Nations hearings. But here, it seemed to bounce off Brad's gelled hair. Brad held up a single finger, not looking at her. "Wait." Vivienne blinked. She wasn't accustomed to being shushed, but she was a patient woman. She waited another full minute. Finally, Brad sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of suffering. He looked up, his eyes scanning her linen outfit and her headscarf. His gaze lingered on her sandals with open disdain. He didn't see the titan of industry. He saw a nuisance. "This is the Summit Lane, ma'am," Brad said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of customer service, polite condescension. "Economy check-in is back there, near the restrooms. You walked past it." He pointed a manicured finger over her shoulder, already looking back down at his screen to dismiss her. "I am aware of where economy is," Vivian said, keeping her tone even. "I am traveling Summit class today. I need to check in for flight MA404 to Zurich." Brad froze. He slowly looked back up, a smirk playing on his lips. He leaned over the podium, invading her personal space just slightly. "Can I see your passport and your ticket?" Vivian reached into her bag and produced her passport and a printed itinerary. She slid them across the marble. Brad snatched them up. He opened the passport, flipping the pages with aggressive snaps. "Senegal," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "Right." He began typing, but he wasn't really checking her in. He was performing. He was clicking keys with excessive force, shaking his head, sighing again. "I'm not finding you," Brad said flatly. "Computer says no." "Please check again," Vivian said. "The booking was made through the corporate portal. The confirmation code is right there." "I see the code," Brad snapped, "but the system flags this as a highly irregular booking. The payment method is pending verification. The payment was a wire transfer cleared 3 days ago," Vivian explained, her accent thickening slightly as she tried to enunciate clearly for him. "If you could call your supervisor, or perhaps the global desk." Brad laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Honey, I am the supervisor. And I don't need to call the global desk to know when someone is trying to pull a fast one with a fraudulent ticket." Vivian straightened her spine. The air around her seemed to change temperature. The weary traveler vanished. The CEO began to emerge. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Brad said, dropping the customer service facade entirely. "We get this all the time. Fake itineraries, stolen credit cards. You think because you print out a piece of paper you can just waltz into the Summit Lounge. I demand you check the system properly," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "And I demand you step aside," Brad countered, his voice raising. "You're holding up the line." Vivian turned around. The line behind her was empty. The terminal was beginning to wake up. Travelers were drifting toward the premium check-in area, drawn by the rising volume of the conversation. Vivian turned back to Brad. She placed her hands flat on the marble counter. "Mr. Holloway, I am asking you, for the last time, to validate my ticket. My name is Dr. Vivian Toussaint. If you are having technical difficulties, I suggest you find a workaround. But do not accuse me of fraud." Brad rolled his eyes so hard it looked painful. He looked past her. Spotting a well-dressed couple in suits approaching the lane, the type of passengers he preferred. White, tailored, carrying Tumi luggage. "Listen," Brad said, loud enough for the approaching couple to hear. "I can't understand half of what you're saying. Your accent is thick, very thick. I need you to speak English, clear English, if you want me to help you." The insult hung in the air like toxic smoke. Vivian went still. "I am speaking English, Mr. Holloway. Perfectly grammatical English." "It's the vowels," Brad mocked, making a hand gesture near his mouth. "You're eating them. It's all mumble. I am Dr. Toussaint." He mimicked her. exaggerating her accent into a grotesque caricature, turning her elegant pronunciation into a cartoonish slur. "We speak standard English at Meridian Airways. If you can't communicate, maybe you shouldn't be flying Summit." The couple behind Vivian stopped. The man, a tall banker type named Harrison, looked uncomfortable. The woman, his wife, looked horrified. "Excuse me," the woman said. Stepping forward, she's speaking perfectly clearly. Brad held up a hand to the woman. "I've got this." "Ma'am, just security protocol. We have to be careful with communication barriers. High-risk profiles. High risk," Vivian repeated, "because of how I speak, because nothing about you matches the profile of a Summit passenger." Brad sneered. He tossed her passport back onto the counter. It slid across the marble and fell onto the floor. He didn't apologize. He didn't move to pick it up. "Oops," Brad said. Deadpan. "Pick that up and move along. Security is on their way." Vivian looked at her passport on the dirty airport floor. Then she looked at Brad. In that moment, she had a choice. She could scream. She could demand to see his manager's manager. She could cause a scene that would end up on TikTok. But Vivian Toussaint did not scream. She calculated. She bent down with immense dignity and picked up her passport. She dusted it off. She placed it back in her bag. "You have made a decision, Bradley," she said. She didn't call him Mr. Holloway anymore. "You have decided that I do not belong here. You have decided my voice is a liability." "I decided you're wasting my time," Brad retorted, turning his attention to the couple behind her with a beaming, fake smile. "Good morning. So sorry for the delay. Welcome to Meridian Summit class. Passports." Vivian didn't move. She took out her phone. It was a simple black smartphone. But the app she opened was not simple. It was the secure communication channel for the Diaspora Ventures Board of Directors. "You are refusing me service," Vivian asked one last time, holding the phone up to record the audio. "I'm refusing entry to a scammer who can't speak English," Brad said, playing to his audience, feeling powerful. "Go back to economy, or better yet, go back to wherever you came from and learn the language before you come to my counter." The words, "go back to wherever you came from," acted like a thunderclap in the quiet lounge. The banker behind Vivian, Harrison, dropped his carry-on. "Hey, buddy, that's enough. That's way out of line." "Sir, please," Brad said, his smile tight. "I'm protecting our premium experience." Vivienne finished typing a message on her phone. It was short Initiate Protocol 0. "Pull the plug, all of it, now." She looked at Brad. Her eyes were not angry. They were filled with a terrifying pity. "You mentioned the global desk earlier," Vivienne said. "You won't need to call them. They're going to call you in about 3 minutes. Brad laughed again. "Is that a threat? Are you putting a voodoo curse on me?" He chuckled at his own racist joke. Vivian turned to the couple behind her. "I apologize for the disruption. Please, go ahead. I will wait right here for the phone to ring." She stepped to the side, leaning against a pillar, crossing her arms. She looked like a statue of judgment. Brad shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable," and began to check in Harrison and his wife. "I really don't feel comfortable with how you treated her," Harrison's wife whispered. "I'm just doing my job, Mum," Brad said smoothly, typing on his keyboard. "You have to be vigilant these days. Now, I see you're going to Zurich as well. Lovely city." But before he could print their boarding passes, His terminal screen flickered. A red box popped up in the center of the monitor. System alert inventory lock. Brad frowned. He hit escape. The box remained. Then, the phone on the desk, the dedicated red line that connected directly to corporate HQ in London, began to ring. It was a shrill, urgent sound that cut through the chatter of the terminal. Brad stared at the phone. He looked at Vivian. She was checking her cuticles, looking bored. The phone rang again, and again. Brad picked it up. Meridian JFK, Holloway speaking. Holloway, a voice barked on the other end. It wasn't a supervisor. It wasn't the station manager. It was the executive vice president of North American operations, a man named Sterling Archer, no relation to the spy. But just as volatile, Brad had never spoken to him directly in his 10 years at the company. "Mr. Archer," Brad stammered. "Sir, who is standing at your counter right now?" Archer screamed. The volume was so loud Brad had to hold the receiver away from his ear. "Just passengers, sir. A Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, and a disruptive woman I'm removing from the area." "Disruptive woman," Archer's voice cracked. "Describe her." African descent, headscarf, unintelligible accent, claims to be a doctor." There was a silence on the line, so profound it felt like the air pressure had dropped. "Holloway," Archer whispered, and the whisper was scarier than the scream. "You idiot! You absolute, colossal idiot! Do you know who that is?" Brad looked at Vivian. She met his gaze and offered a small, cold smile. "That," Archer said, "is Vivian Toussaint. She controls the Diaspora Ventures account, the $95 million account, the one we are supposed to sign at noon today." Brad's stomach dropped through the floor. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he was about to faint. "And," Archer continued, "we just received a notification from her legal team. They are invoking the immediate termination clause of our preliminary agreement due to gross violation of dignity and discriminatory practices at the point of entry. They are pulling the contract. Holloway, all of it." Brad's hand began to shake. "Sir, she didn't look—" "Shut up," Archer roared. "Fix it. You have exactly 30 seconds to fix it before I call security to escort you out of the building myself. Put her on the phone, now." Brad slowly lowered the phone. He looked at Vivian. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. He looked small. "Doctor. Toussaint." He squeaked. Vivian didn't move from the pillar. "Yes. Bradley. It's for you. It's Mr. Archer. I have nothing to say to Mr. Archer," Vivian said calmly. "And I certainly won't be touching that phone. You've been breathing all over it." She pushed off the pillar and grabbed the handle of her bag. Where are you going?" Brad stammered, panic rising in his chest. "I am going to the Delta terminal," Vivian said. "I believe they have a flight to Zurich leaving in an hour, and I hear they are quite fond of accents over there." She turned to walk away. "Wait, please." Brad actually vaulted over the side of the podium, scrambling to get in front of her. "Please, Dr. Toussaint. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I didn't know who you were." Vivian stopped. She looked down at him. "That is exactly the problem. Bradley," she said, "you treated me like dirt because you thought I was nobody. If you had treated me with basic human respect, you wouldn't be in this position. The fact that I have money shouldn't change how you treat a human being." She stepped around him. But the drama was far from over. Because as Vivian walked away, a notification pinged on the phones of every single passenger in the Summit line, and then on the phones of the staff. The Diaspora Ventures app had just sent a push notification to its 50,000 premium members, many of whom were currently in airports around the world. The subject line read, "Emergency Advisory Meridian Airways Boycott, effective immediately." Brad's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. He read the notification, and then he watched as Harrison, the banker he was just helping, looked at his own phone, then looked at Brad with disgust. "Cancel my ticket," Harrison said. "What?" Brad blinked. "I said cancel it," Harrison said, picking up his bag. "My firm does business with Toussaint and Graves. If she says you're toxic, you're toxic. I'm not flying with bigots." Harrison walked away. Then his wife. Then the couple behind them. It was starting. The dominoes were falling, and Brad was standing at the bottom, watching the avalanche begin. News travels fast, but money travels faster. While Brad was still standing at the abandoned Summit podium, staring blankly at the closed sign he had been forced to put up, chaos was erupting 3,000 miles away in London. The headquarters of Meridian Airways was a glass monolith overlooking the Thames. Usually, the executive floor was a place of hushed whispers and expensive espresso. Today, it sounded like a trading floor during a crash. Sterling Archer, the EVP of Operations, slammed his phone down so hard the receiver cracked. He looked at the massive monitors on the wall. The stock ticker for Meridian MDN was flashing red. "Down 4% in 20 minutes, his assistant, a terrified young man named Colin, read from a tablet. "Sir, the market is reacting to the Diaspora Ventures boycott notification. It's trending on Bloomberg terminals. Get me Toussaint," Archer barked. "Get her on the phone. Get her on a satellite link. Get a carrier pigeon if you have to. I don't care how—" "We've tried, sir," Colin stammered. Her executive assistant blocked our numbers. The legal team at Toussaint and Graves sent a cease and desist letter regarding communication. They said any further contact will be considered harassment. Archer slumped into his chair. He rubbed his temples. "Do we know why she was going to Zurich specifically? I know it was for the contract signing, but who else is there?" Colin swiped on his tablet. "Sir, you're not going to like this. Read it. She was meeting with Prince Malik of Jordan and the CEO of the Swiss banking group. They were launching a joint initiative for sustainable tourism in Africa. The $950 million contract was just the entry fee for Meridian to be the exclusive carrier for this initiative. The total value over 10 years, Colin swallowed hard, is estimated at $4 billion. Archer closed his eyes. $4 billion. Gone. Because a gate agent in Queens didn't like the way a woman pronounced her vowels. "And there's more," Colin whispered. "How can there be more? Doctor, Toussaint isn't just a CEO. She holds a diplomatic passport. She is the honorary consul for economic development for Senegal. Technically, Brad didn't just insult a customer. He detained a diplomat." Archer stood up slowly. He walked to the window and looked out at the grey London skyline. "Fire him," Archer said softly. "Sir Raw, fire Holloway, and don't just fire him. I want a press release out in 10 minutes stating he has been terminated for violating our core values. I want him erased from the company directory before he even gets to his car. And cancel his pension. Find a clause. Gross negligence should cover it. Sir, the union will fight that." "Let them fight," Archer screamed, spinning around. "I am trying to save a $4 billion deal. Burn him. Colin, burn him to the ground. Back at JFK, the burning had already begun. 2 Port Authority police officers approached the summit podium. Brad looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Maybe they were here to remove the disruptive passengers. Bradley Halloway? The older officer asked. Yes. Officer, listen, I'm glad you're here. This situation has gotten out of... Hand over your badge, the officer said, cutting him off. Brad blinked. Excuse me. Meridian Corporate just contacted airport security. Your security clearance has been revoked effectively immediately. You are no longer authorized to be in the sterile area. We need to escort you to the curb. You can't be serious, Brad gasped. I'm the station lead. I run this terminal. Not anymore. Pal, the officer said. He reached over, unclipped the ID badge from Brad's blazer, and dropped it into his pocket. Let's go. Don't make a scene. Brad looked around. The other agents people he had bullied, micromanaged, and criticized for years were watching. They weren't looking at him with sympathy. They were watching with the grim satisfaction of seeing a tyrant fall. As Brad was marched past the economy check-in, the very place he had banished Vivian to, he saw a group of passengers watching a video on a phone. They were laughing. He didn't know it yet, but he was already famous. Doctor. Vivian Toussaint was sitting in the Delta One lounge. It was quieter here. The lighting was warmer. A lounge attendant named Maria had just brought her a pot of fresh peppermint tea and a warm towel. Is there anything else I can get you? Doctor. Toussaint, Maria asked with a genuine smile. We are so honored to have you with us today. This is perfect. Maria. Thank you, Vivian said. Her voice was calm, her composure restored. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her niece in Atlanta. Auntie Viv, is this you? You're trending on TikTok. #airport Ken. Vivian frowned. She opened the link. The video had been filmed by the teenager standing in line behind the banker. Harrison. It was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Brad's voice, tinny and mocking. It's the vowels, you're eating them. It's all mumble. Vivian's voice, calm and regal. I am speaking English, Mr. Halloway. Brad, go back to wherever you came from. The video had been up for 40 minutes. It had 2.3 million views. The comments were a waterfall of rage at Travel Queen. I know this guy. He made me cry when my bag was 1 pound overweight. He's a monster at Investbro. Wait, isn't that Vivian Toussaint? The PE legend. This guy just insulted a billionaire el-all. R.I.P. his career at Justice. Now, Meridian Airways supports racism. #boycott Meridian. Vivian watched it once. She felt a twinge of sadness not for herself, but for the sheer ugliness of the moment captured forever. She put the phone down. She had a speech to write for Zurich. She didn't have time for internet fame. But Brad Halloway had nothing but time. He was standing on the curb outside Terminal 4, waiting for an Uber, because his company car privileges had been remotely disabled. It started to rain. His phone began to vibrate. It wasn't a text. It was a call from an unknown number. He ignored it. Then another. Then a text from his wife, Brad. Why are reporters calling the house? What did you do? Brad's stomach turned to ice. He opened Twitter X. The first thing he saw was his own face, zoomed in, mouth open in a sneer. Trending #FireBrad. Trending #Meridian Meltdown. He clicked on a news article from TMZ that had just dropped. Headline, Meridian Airways. Executive fired after racist rant against African diplomat. Fired, Brad whispered to the rain. They can't fire me. I've been there 20 years. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Brad reached for the door handle, thinking it was his Uber. The window rolled down. It wasn't an Uber driver. It was a cameraman. A reporter from a local New York news station stuck a microphone out the window. "Mr. Holloway, do you have a comment on the allegations that you racially profiled Dr. Toussaint? Is it true you told her to go back where she came from?" Brad recoiled like he'd been slapped. "No comment. Get away from me." Meridian Airways just issued a statement calling your behavior abhorrent and confirmed your termination. The reporter pressed. "Do you have anything to say to the African American community?" Brad turned and ran. He actually ran, sprinting down the sidewalk with his luggage bouncing behind him, water splashing up his expensive trousers. He ducked into a parking garage, hiding behind a concrete pillar, panting. He checked his email. One new message from Meridian HR. Subject notice of termination / legal hold. Dear Mr. Holloway, effective immediately. Your employment is terminated for cause. Furthermore, please be advised that Meridian Legal is reviewing the potential for a civil suit against you personally for damages regarding the loss of the Diaspora Ventures contract. You are hereby ordered to preserve all documents. Civil suit. Damages. Brad did the math in his head. The contract was $950 million. If they sued him for even 0.1% of the damages, he would be destitute. He would lose his house, his pension, his car, everything. He slid down the concrete pillar until he was sitting on the dirty floor of the parking garage. Just 2 hours ago, he had been a king. He had the power to let people fly or make them stay. He had felt strong, mocking a woman he thought was weak. Now, he was hiding in a garage, unemployed, facing a lawsuit that would ruin his bloodline, while the woman he mocked was likely sipping champagne at 30,000 feet. His phone buzzed again. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Vivian Toussaint posted an update with trembling fingers. Brad clicked it. Vivian had posted a photo from the Delta plane. She was holding a glass of orange juice, smiling warmly at a Delta flight attendant who was black. Caption, "Kindness costs nothing, but prejudice costs everything. Thank you to the wonderful team at Delta for welcoming me and the Diaspora Consortium. We look forward to a long partnership. Off to Zurich to build the future. #respect. #new beginnings." Brad stared at the screen. The post already had 50,000 likes. He looked at the engagement metrics. The stock price of Meridian was down 12%. The stock price of Delta was up 3%. He had single-handedly shifted the aviation market. He put his head in his hands and wept. But nobody was there to hear him. And if they were, they likely wouldn't have understood his accent through the sobbing. Brad Holloway sat in his living room in Queens, the silence of the house amplified by the chaos in his mind. His wife, Sheila, had taken the kids to her mother's house in Long Island an hour ago. Her parting words had been efficient and brutal. "Fix this, Brad, or don't come get us." He stared at his laptop screen. The Meridian Airways stock was in freefall. The #FireBrad was now trending worldwide, sandwiched between a celebrity breakup and a geopolitical crisis. He was a global villain, but Brad was a man of operations. He solved problems. And in his panicked, delusional state, he convinced himself there was only one solution. He had to go to Zurich. He had to find Dr. Toussaint before she signed that contract with another airline. He had to beg, plead, grovel, whatever it took to get her to retract the statement. If he could save the deal, Meridian would have to hire him back, They would have to. He tried to log into the employee travel portal to list himself for a flight. Access denied. He tried to call his contacts at the Interline desk. They went straight to voicemail. He had to buy a ticket, a real ticket, with money. He searched for flights to Zurich. A last-minute, one-way ticket on a major carrier was $3,800. He didn't have that cash liquid. His credit cards were near their limit. He scrolled down, way down. There was one option, Air Transatlantic Budget Express, with a layover in Reykjavik and a connection on a regional propeller plane. Economy light, non-refundable. No checked bags allowed without a fee. Price $1,200. He clicked Purchase with a shaking hand. It maxed out his visa. 6 hours later, Brad Halloway, the man who had spent a decade sneering at passengers who didn't understand the nuances of priority boarding, found himself in the fiery circle of travel hell. JFK Terminal 1 was crowded, hot, and smelled of wet wool and fast food. Brad stood in the general boarding line for 45 minutes. When he finally reached the front, the agent, a young woman who looked exhausted, weighed his carry-on bag. "You're 2 kilograms over," she said, not looking up. "You have to check it. That's $75. "Can't you just let it slide?" Brad pleaded, flashing a desperate, winning smile. "I used to be in the industry, station lead for Meridian." The agent looked at him. She recognized the face from the news. Her expression hardened into stone. $75, she repeated. "Card only. Step aside if you can't pay." Brad paid. He walked onto the plane. It was an older model, the seats crammed together with zero legroom. He walked past the business class curtain, a thin veil of fabric separating him from the world he used to belong to, and trudged all the way to row 48. Seat 48B, the middle seat. To his left was a backpacker who hadn't showered in several days, eating a tuna sandwich. To his right was a mother with a teething infant who was already screaming before the engine started. "Excuse me," Brad muttered, trying to shove his laptop bag under the seat in front of him. It didn't fit. "Bin space is full," a flight attendant barked from down the aisle. "You'll have to gate check that. But my laptop, gate check or get off." "Sir." Brad watched his bag, containing his only change of clothes and his grooming kit, get tossed into the hold. The flight was 7 hours of turbulence. The baby screamed for 5 of them. The backpacker fell asleep on Brad's shoulder, drooling slightly. Brad couldn't recline his seat because the mechanism was broken. He sat upright, staring at the seat back pocket in front of him, which had gum stuck to it. He thought about the Summit Lounge. He thought about the leather armchairs, the silence, the champagne. He thought about Vivienne Toussaint, probably sleeping in a lie-flat pod on Delta, covered in a duvet made of Egyptian cotton. He realized, with a jolt of nausea that wasn't from the turbulence, that he had built his entire identity on being the gatekeeper of luxury. He wasn't the luxury itself. He was just the doorman. And now, the doorman was out in the cold. They landed in Reykjavik for a 3-hour layover. Brad spent it pacing the terminal, checking his phone. The news was getting worse. Update: Meridian Airways Board of Directors calls emergency meeting. Shareholders demand resignation of VP Sterling Archer. Brad felt a spike of guilt, quickly followed by self-preservation. If Archer was fired, there was nobody left to save him. The connecting flight to Zurich was on a small commuter plane. It was freezing on board. Brad shivered in his wrinkled suit jacket. He hadn't eaten in 12 hours because He refused to pay $14 for a sandwich. When they finally touched down in Zurich, it was pouring rain, a grey, relentless Swiss downpour. Brad waited at the baggage carousel. The belt went round and round. Passengers grabbed their skis, their suitcases, their boxes. The crowd thinned. The belt stopped. Brad's bag was not there. He went to the lost luggage counter. The agent there spoke perfect English, French, and German. "I'm sorry, sir," she said politely. "Your bag seems to have been misrouted to Frankfurt. We can have it delivered to your hotel in perhaps 2 days." 2 days. Brad croaked. "I have a meeting today. I have nothing but the clothes on my back. I can offer you a toiletries kit," she said, handing him a small plastic pouch containing a tiny toothbrush and a comb. "Welcome to Zurich." Brad walked out of the airport. He didn't have money for a taxi. He had to figure out the train system. He stood on the platform, wet, hungry, smelling of airplane air and tuna sandwich, courtesy of his neighbor, wearing a wrinkled suit that was too tight. He looked at his reflection in the train window. He looked like a madman. He was a madman with a mission. He checked the location of the Diaspora Ventures Summit. It was being held at the Dolder Grand, one of the most exclusive hotels in Europe, perched high on a hill overlooking the city and the lake. "I'm coming. Doctor. Toussaint," Brad whispered to the glass. "I'm going to make this right." The Dolder Grand is less of a hotel and more of a castle. It sits like a crown jewel above Zurich, a mix of historic turrets and sweeping modern curves. The driveway is usually filled with Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and the black limousines of diplomats. Today, the driveway was blocked by security checkpoints. The Diaspora Ventures signing was a high-security event. Brad Halloway arrived on foot. He had taken the funicular train up the mountain and walked the last mile in the rain. His gelled hair had collapsed into a wet, stringy mess. His expensive Italian loafers were squelching with water. He approached the main gate. A massive Swiss security guard, wearing an earpiece and a suit that cost more than Brad's car, stepped in his path. "Gruesi," the guard said, his face impassive. "Private event. Can I help you?" I need to speak to Dr. Vivian Toussaint," Brad panted, wiping rain from his eyes. "It's an emergency, a corporate emergency regarding Meridian Airways." The guard looked Brad up and down. He saw the soaked suit, the wild eyes, the lack of a badge. "Is your name on the guest list, sir?" "No, but she knows me. We have unfinished business. Just tell her Brad is here. Brad from JFK." The guard touched his earpiece. He spoke in German, low and fast. He listened. Then he looked back at Brad. "Doctor, Toussaint is currently in the keynote address. She is not accepting visitors. Please leave the property." "No," Brad shouted. The desperation finally snapped something inside him. "You don't understand. My life is over if I don't talk to her. I just need 5 minutes." He tried to push past the guard. It was like trying to push a mountain. The guard simply grabbed Brad's arm, a grip like a vice, and held him in place. "Sir, do not make me escalate this." Just then, the massive glass doors of the hotel entrance opened. A group of people walked out under the shelter of the awning to take a break or smoke. In the center of the group was Vivienne. She looked radiant. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that looked like it was made of woven moonlight. She was laughing at something the Prince of Jordan was saying. A photographer was snapping pictures. "Vivian!" Brad screamed, struggling against the guard's grip. "Doctor, Toussaint, look at me." The laughter stopped. The group turned. Vivienne looked out into the rain. She squinted slightly. She saw the soaking wet. Frantic man being restrained by security. Recognition dawned on her face. It wasn't fear. It was a profound disappointment. She said something to the prince, excused herself, and walked toward the edge of the awning. She stayed dry. Brad stood 10 feet away in the pouring rain. "Mr. Holloway," she said. Her voice carried clearly over the sound of the storm. "Vivienne, Doctor, Toussaint," Brad stammered. He fell to his knees, literally dropped into a puddle on the cobblestones. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You have to call them off. Meridian. They fired me. They took my pension. I have 3 kids. Please, just put out a statement saying it was a misunderstanding. I'm begging you." The cameras were clicking furiously now. This was the shot of the century, the fallen agent begging the Queen. Vivienne looked down at him. She didn't look triumphant. She looked sad. "Bradley," she said gently, "get up. You are embarrassing yourself." "I don't care," Brad sobbed. "I need my life back. You ruined my life over one mistake." Vivienne's expression hardened. "I did not ruin your life. You spent 20 years building a life on the foundation of your own superiority. You thought you could crush people because you stood behind a podium. I didn't knock your house down. Bradley, I just opened the door and let the wind in. You built it with cards." "I can change," Brad cried. "I'll do anything." "Then change," Vivienne said. "But do it for yourself, not for a job." She turned to walk away. "Wait." Brad lunged forward, but the guard held him back. Suddenly, a black Mercedes van pulled up silently behind Brad. The doors slid open. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't hotel security. They weren't police. They were lawyers. One of them, a man with a face like a shark, stepped into the rain holding a leather folder. He walked right up to the kneeling Brad. "Bradley Holloway?" the lawyer asked. Brad looked up, confused, water dripping from his nose. "Yes." "I am representing Meridian Airways and the Global Liability Trust," the man said. He dropped a thick packet of documents onto Brad's wet chest. "You are hereby served," the lawyer said. "Served." Brad stared at the packet. The ink was already starting to blur from the rain, but the bold letters were visible. "Civil lawsuit for damages. Meridian Airways versus Bradley Holloway counts 1. Tortious interference with business relations. 2. Gross negligence resulting in brand defamation. 3. Breach of fiduciary duty. Total damages sought $50 million. $50 million USD. Brad stopped breathing. The number was so large it didn't look real. $50 million, he whispered. "We are also filing an injunction to freeze your assets immediately," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. "This includes your home, your savings, and your 401k. You have 21 days to respond. Have a nice day." The lawyers got back in the van and drove away. Vivienne watched from the awning. She hadn't ordered the lawsuit that was Meridian trying to salvage their stock price by sacrificing Brad, but she didn't stop it either. She looked at Brad one last time. He was kneeling in the mud, holding the paperwork that certified his complete destruction. "Security," Vivienne said softly to the head guard. "Yes." "Madame, please ensure Mr. Holloway gets a ride to the airport and give him a towel. He is shivering." "You are too kind." "Madame," the guard said. "No," Vivienne replied, turning back to the warmth of the hotel lobby. "I am just humane. Something he forgot how to be." She walked back inside, the heavy doors closed. shutting out the rain and the weeping man. Brad was left alone with the sound of the thunder and the weight of $50 million on his chest. He looked at the closed doors. He realized then that no amount of apologizing, no amount of begging, would undo the damage. He had thrown a stone into a lake, and now he was drowning in the ripples. He slowly tried to stand up, but his legs gave out. He sat in the puddle, defeated. A young valet parker, a kid no older than 19, walked over with a towel. He hesitated, looking at the man who was all over TikTok as a villain. "Sir?" the kid asked. Brad looked up. "Here," the kid said, handing him the towel. "Dry your face." Brad took it. "Thank you," he rasped. "My mum saw the video," the kid said, standing over him. "She cried. She speaks with an accent, too. People are mean to her sometimes." Brad froze. He looked at the kid's name tag. "Matteo." "I'm sorry," Brad whispered. And for the first time in the entire ordeal, he wasn't apologizing to get his job back. He was apologizing because he finally, truly, understood the pain he had caused. "Yeah," Matteo said, looking at the hotel where Vivian was signing $1 billion deal. "Karma is a mirror, man. Eventually, you have to look at it. 5 years have passed since the incident at Terminal 4. The aviation industry is different now. Walk into any major airport, JFK, Heathrow, Dubai, and you will see the changes. They are subtle, but they are there. Staff training manuals now include a mandatory module titled The Toussaint Protocol, Cultural Competency and Bias Elimination. It is the most failed module in the industry, requiring an 100% pass rate to remain employed. Doctor, Vivian Toussaint is no longer just a CEO. She is an icon. Toussaint and Graves has grown into a global powerhouse, managing a portfolio of $15 billion, focusing heavily on ethical travel and sustainable development in the global south. She still travels, of course, but she rarely flies commercial. When she does, it is usually on her own terms, on a crisp October morning. Vivienne was back at JFK. She was there to cut the ribbon on the new Global Heritage Lounge, a space designed specifically for international travelers, featuring prayer rooms, translation services in 50 languages, and a staff recruited from the most diverse zip codes in New York. The press was there. The flashbulbs popped as Vivian held the giant scissors. "This lounge is not just a place to wait," Vivian told the crowd, her voice amplified by the microphone, rich and clear. "It is a promise that no matter where you come from or what you sound like, you belong here." The crowd applauded. Among them was the new CEO of Meridian Airways, a woman named Elena, hired specifically to clean up the cultural rot left by the previous administration. She clapped the loudest. After the ceremony, Vivian walked through the terminal, flanked by her security. She was heading to her car. As she passed the janitorial supply closet near the exit, she saw a man mopping the floor. He was older now. His hair was thinning and grey, no longer gelled into a helmet. He wore a grey jumpsuit with the name Clean Corp stitched on the pocket. He looked tired. His shoulders were stooped, the posture of a man who had carried a heavy weight for a long time. He was scrubbing a stubborn scuff mark on the linoleum. Vivian stopped. Her security detail tensed up. "Doctor, Toussaint," her bodyguard asked. "Everything okay?" Vivian didn't answer. She watched the man. It was Brad. He didn't see her at first. He was focused on the floor when he finally looked up to dip his mop into the bucket. He froze. He saw the woman in the indigo scarf, the woman who had cost him his empire. But he didn't look angry. He didn't look resentful. He looked humbled. Brad Halloway had lost everything. The lawsuit had taken his savings. The divorce had taken his home. He had spent 2 years unemployed, rejected from every customer service job in the city, because a simple Google search of his name brought up the video. Airport Ken. He had finally found work here, as a night shift custodian. The irony was not lost on him. He spent his nights cleaning the floors of the terminal he used to rule. Brad gripped the handle of the mop. He swallowed hard. Doctor Toussaint, he whispered. Vivian looked at him. She saw the grey jumpsuit. She saw the lines in his face. Mr. Halloway, she said. Brad looked down at his shoes. I saw the speech on the monitors, the new lounge. It looks nice. Thank you, Vivian said. There was a long silence. The bustle of the airport moved around them, thousands of people rushing to their destinations, oblivious to the history between these two people. I never got to say it, Brad said, his voice cracking. I tried in Zurich, but I never said it. He looked up at her, tears welling in his eyes. I am sorry. I was small. I was cruel. And you didn't deserve that. Vivian studied him. She didn't offer forgiveness instantly. Forgiveness is earned, but she saw that life had already extracted its pound of flesh from him. Karma had done its work. There was no need for her to add to it. We are defined by how we treat those who can do nothing for us. Bradley, Vivian said softly. You learned that lesson the hard way, but you learned it. She reached into her bag. She pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was a voucher for a coffee at the new Global Heritage Lounge. Go upstairs, she said, placing the card on his cleaning cart. Take a break. Have a coffee. Sit in a comfortable chair. Remind yourself what it feels like to be treated like a human being. Brad stared at the card. I can't, he stammered. I'm just the janitor. I'm not allowed in the lounge. Vivian smiled. It was the smile of a queen. You are today, she said. Tell them Vivian sent you. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the polished floor, heading out into the bright sunlight of the waiting city. Brad watched her go. Then, he looked at the voucher. He looked at his mop. He propped the mop against the wall. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit. And for the first time in 5 years, Brad Halloway walked toward the lounge, not to judge, not to rule, but to sit, to listen, and to learn. Wow, talk about a landing. Brad Halloway learned the hardest lesson of all when you try to make someone else feel small. You're usually the one who ends up shrinking. It cost him his career, his reputation, and his fortune to learn the value of basic respect. Doctor, Toussaint proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about knowing exactly who you are, even when others refuse to see it. So, here is the question for you guys. Have you ever been judged by someone who didn't know who they were messing with? Or have you ever seen a Brad get served a slice of instant karma? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. Let's expose the prejudice and celebrate the comebacks. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more stories about justice, karma, and the people who fought back, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Be kind to each other out there. You never know who you're talking to. See you in the next one.